Good evening, and welcome back to your adventure. I, of course, am Jack, aka Count Von Count, your narrator, storyteller, and guide through the lands of Kjlovania. I hope you're ready and excited to jump right back in where we left off last week. This, of course, is the Seven Masks of Malice.
The clouds folded in on themselves, erasing the face as if it was ashamed of what it had shown. The wind limped away through the trees, dragging the last whisper of thunder with it. For a long while, no one spoke. The only sound was the drip of rain through the burned rafters, tapping on the floorboards where the ash and blood had met. The air stunk of burning flesh and copper. Jackson's sword lowered first. The others followed suit, slower, uncertain that the danger had truly passed. "What the hell was that?" Leaf said finally, voice too sharp for the silence. "A warning," Gabriel murmured, eyes still on the sky. "Or a promise." Juno wiped a smear of blood from her cheek with the back of her wrist. "Whatever it was," she said, "it looked like it knew us." Dion couldn't look away from her. He fumbled for words and then smiled instead. Juno turned toward him, catching his stare, and remained unimpressed. "You're bleeding." "You noticed," he said, grinning wider. Cassian, standing apart from the others, was staring at the dying fire. The light pulled his features thin, the angular grace of his face, the dark eyes, the faint glint of teeth that caught the glow too sharply. He looked like something that had stepped out of the flames rather than away from them. Gabriel noticed first. "You should sit," he said gently. "You've lost color." Cassian didn't move. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice flat, deliberate, "before we continue down this path." Seberic frowned. "Now isn't the time for confessions," he said. "It is," Cassian said, "because if what we saw in the sky was truly Xavier, then he'll already know what I am." The others turned to him. He unfastened the collar of his cloak, letting the torchlight fall on the pale, unmarred skin of his neck and the faint, unnatural pulse beneath it. "I carry the blood curse, with all the terrible downsides and only a few benefits. I was once a justiciar with the Church of the Crimson Sun. I hunted these creatures and rid the land of their filth in God's name, until I was betrayed by my own. The vampire that turned me let me live as a punishment for a life wasted, forced to hunger and hunt for eternity." Jackson exhaled a low note, half whistle, half surprise. "Dampier, then," he said. "That explains why you don't eat, you don't sleep, and you brood like it's a sport." Leaf's hand drifted to his dagger. "And here I thought you just needed sunlight." "Put that down," Gabriel said, his voice colder now. "He's not your enemy." Leaf's eyes flicked between them. "You don't know that." "I know monsters," Gabriel said softly, "and he's not one." Dorian straightened, the runes of his gauntlet dimming to a steady, trusting glow. "You've kept your hunger in check this long," he said. "That's more than most men can say of their vices." Cassian's lips twitched, not quite a smile. You'd be surprised what a man can live with if he knows what he's running from. Seberic sheathed his sword with a quiet click. "If you turn on us, it will be the last thing you do." Cassian nodded. "That's fair. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to satiate my affliction." His eyes flared a bright red, and he ducked back into the hovel. The silence that follows was not friendly, but it was understanding. Behind them, the rescued villager stirred. His name, as they'd learned between gasps, was Joseph, a farmer from the edge of Withermarsh. His skin was scorched from shoulder to hip where the cultist's fire had caught him, and his breath rattled in a way that made even Dion wince. "He won't last the walk," Seberic said. "He'll last," Dorian replied. "He has to." They bound his burns as best they could, tore cloth from spare tunics, poured what healing drafts they still had, and they set off for town, the fire behind them sinking into the mist. The path was slick with new rain, their boots pulling free of the mud with slow, wet sighs. Fog moved like a living thing across the road, pausing as if it was watching them cautiously. Ahead, in the dark, a shadow moved towards them, slowly and with a creak. A wooden cart appeared around a bend, drawn by an old mule and lit by a single lantern swinging from the handle. A smell reached them first. Cloves, cinnamon, pepper, saffron, 1,000 spices braided together. "Evening, travelers," called a man from the shadow next to the cart. His voice was cracked with age, but was as warm as honey. He stepped into the lamplight, and his face lit up in the orange glow of the flame. He was small and stooped, with a beard like a dusting of snow and eyes a little too kind for the hour. "Fine night for business, eh?" Dorian raised a hand and an eyebrow. "Not many merchants travel this late." "Ah, well," the man said, smiling wide. "A merchant who sleeps is a merchant who starves. Care for a sample? Spice for the stew? Powder for the pipe? Something to keep the cold off your bones?" Dorian's mechanical owl tilted his head, the lenses focusing with a soft whir. "Strange time to sell luxuries," Juno murmured. "Strange land for luxuries, aye," the merchant said cheerfully, "but I've made worse trades." Gabriel stepped closer, keeping Joseph steady with one arm. "You've seen anyone else tonight? Red hoods, maybe?" "Red?" the man frowned. Only the sunset, I'm afraid." His cart was piled high with jars and vials, some unlabeled, others painted with a curling script. The scent of nutmeg and anise filled the air. "I've powders for pain," he said, noticing Joseph's burns. "One pinch and you'll sleep like a babe." "He doesn't need sleep," Jackson said. "He needs a healer." The merchant chuckled softly. "Sleep heals all, Jackson, my boy." The words came out too smooth, too rehearsed. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "Hey, how?" he started. But the smell changed. The sweetness curdled. The torchlight warped, the colors bending. Dorian stumbled first, his gauntlet flickering as the runes dimmed to nothing. Jackson cursed, the words slurred. Leaf reached for his dagger and missed it by inches. The merchant's smile lingered as the world folded in on itself. "Shh," he said. "The dawn is kind to the obedient." Darkness. They woke to cold mud and the ache of wrong sleep. The lantern was gone, the mule, the cart, the man. Only the scent of cloves remained. Joseph lay a few feet away, breathing hard, his face slick with sweat. When Gabriel turned him over, he froze. The man's mouth was red. His tongue was gone. "Oh, God," Juno gasped. Gabriel's hands trembled as he pulled the small silver mirror from his satchel. He held it up, catching the faint moonlight, and for a moment, a flicker of a face appeared behind his reflection. A smile, red and knowing. "No," Gabriel said softly. His thumb pressed into the glass until it cracked. The mirror shattered in his hand, slicing his skin, shards falling into the mud. "We should have destroyed this the moment we saw that face." "We need to move," Seberic said, his voice tight. "He's dying." They carried Joseph the rest of the way in silence, the night pressing closer with every step. Withermarsh was quiet and dark as the party entered the same way they left. The only things moving in the shadows were rats. Swiftly they made their way towards the tavern, and as they arrived they burst through the door with an alarming sense of urgency. Old Ruin looked up from his stool behind the bar, eyes widening at the sight. "By all the damned gods," he muttered. "What happened to him?" "He was taken by those fanatics you warned us about. He needs rest and a healer," Gabriel said, "and something strong to forget the pain." Ruin nodded, clearing the table with one sweep of his arm. "I'll fetch what I can, put him here." Joseph's breathing rasped like sand dragging through glass. He sputtered, blood pooling at his lips and running down his chin. His eyes fluttered open once, saw Ruin, and then rolled back into his head. "Rooms are upstairs," Ruin said. "No use sitting here watching him suffer. I'll take care of him." The party slowly retreated from the table, solemn in spirit and carrying a burden of responsibility that was heavy in the air. Dorian and Cassian found corners of the tavern to sit quietly in shadow while they watched Joseph lying on the table, twitching occasionally, and Ruin searched frantically for medical supplies in his storeroom. Juno quietly slipped into a room by herself, locking the door behind her. And across the hall, Gabriel and Seberic took a narrow room with 2 beds, leaving Jackson to find space between them on the floor, his fiddle in hand, bow resting on his chest as if he was ready to play a sad tune. Gabriel sat by the window watching the mist curl over the marsh, and his reflection fractured in the cracked pane. Dion and Leaf were left also sharing a room, Dion sprawling across the single bed like he'd claimed territory, and Leaf wedging himself under the window with a muttered curse. "Don't snore," Leaf said. "No promises," Dion replied, grinning in the dark. Morning came slowly to Withermarsh, prying through the mist like a thief too tired to care. Rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving the streets slick and glimmering. Water dripped from the roof at a rhythmic pace. Inside the hollow hearth, the fire had burned down to embers, its warmth traded for the smell of smoke and ale. The first to stir was Dorian. He sat upright with the mechanical precision of his kind, runes along his gauntlet flaring one by one, and his brass owl blinked awake, gave a small metallic chirp, and took a perch in the rafters. On the floor upstairs, Jackson lay sprawled, snoring slightly. Gabriel was already dressed, hair tied back, eyes hollow with thought. Seberic stretched, the sound of steel plates shifting loud enough to wake the dead. Across the hall, laughter came first, and then a groan. "Get off me, you mountain!" Leif's voice carried through the thin wood. "Spooning keeps the cold away," Dion replied cheerfully. "It's science." "You were purring," Leif replied. "That's the sound of contentment, little man," Dion laughed. Leif appeared in the hall moments later, hair a mess, shirt half tucked, glaring at nothing. He headed down the stairs to the tavern's main hall, and Dion followed behind him, shirtless as ever, stretching like a cat basking in attention. Cassian sat in the same corner he ended the night in and watched the two come down the stairs. He looked at Dorian and grinned, winking as he did. "What's this I heard of spoons, dear Leif?" Cassian cackled. Dorian couldn't help but follow it with a chuckle. "Did Dion keep you warm last night?" Leif was not amused. "Shut up." "You're welcome," Dion said. He caught sight of Juno descending the stairs, armor strapped and hair still damp from washing. His grin brightened. "Morning, Hammer Queen. Did you dream of me?" She didn't break stride. "I dreamt of silence, and it was nice while it lasted." "She's warming up to me," Dion said, utterly convinced. Ruin chuckled, polishing a tankard that didn't need it. "You lot make more noise than a funeral band. Joseph's not here, though, if you're looking." Gabriel's face tightened. "Where?" "Moved him to the old granary," Ruin said. "Got more space, less stink. He's breathing better, thanks to a healer I sent. Poor bastard'll be on broth for a month, but he'll live." "Good," Gabriel said. His tone was soft, relieved, but heavy. "He deserves at least that." "He'll need luck too," Ruin added. "There's talk spreading already. Crimson Sun business. You really kicked a nest that's been quiet too long." Dorian leaned his elbows on the counter. "I think it's time we learned who's tending to that nest." Ruin nodded, lowering his voice. "The one wearing the robes around here is Father Ulrich, runs what's left of the chapel. He used to be a kind man, now he preaches about purity and obedience like he's sharpening a knife. If you want to go knocking, that's where you'll find trouble." Juno's jaw tightened. The gauntlet of her right hand creaked. "Father Ulrich," she repeated, the name turning heavy in her mouth. "I look forward to that sermon." Leif eyed her warily. "Remind me not to stand between you and the clergy." "Smart boy," she replied. Ruin poured them weak coffee and lowered his voice again. "If you plan on walking through town without half the guard following, start over in the market. Traders here, everything. Caravans, missing folk, the Crimson Sun's new tricks. You'll find whispers before you find truth." "Anyone in particular we should talk to?" Dorian asked. "Aye. Silka the alchemist, I'd say. Gray hair, brighter than a forge flame, mouth full of sarcasm. She sells her tinctures in the far corner by the fishmongers. She knows which caravans vanished on the road to Braxia and which ones just never meant to arrive." "And she'll talk?" Gabriel asked. "Well, for a price," Ruin said. "She's been asking for help, though. Wants someone brave, or stupid, to fetch her a flower, or something of the like." Dion grinned. "A flower quest? Finally, something romantic." "Flowers in that forest eat flesh," Ruin said. Dion's grin faltered. "Less romantic. And if you've got coin left after that," Ruin continued, "seek out the blind oracle. You'll find her building over near the well. Smells like incense and mildew. Fortune teller, they say. Knows things she shouldn't. Names, faces, the kind of things that makes decent folk uncomfortable." "Superstition," Seberic said. Ruin shrugged. "Maybe, but she's never been wrong enough to starve." The group exchanged glances, the kind that carry equal parts curiosity and dread. "Market first," Dorian stated calmly. "We move as one, we keep low, and we remember that every whisper in this place belongs to someone dangerous." "Understood," Gabriel replied. "Breakfast first," Dion said, raising a hand, "then danger." Ruin laughed and pushed a tray of stale bread and stew towards him. "Eat fast, hero. The marsh doesn't wait for the hungry." They ate standing, watching the fog outside roll between the buildings like smoke from a slow fire. Somewhere, a bell tolled, dull and tired, calling no one to prayer. As they stepped out into the morning, the planks groaned beneath their boots. The town moved in muted rhythm, fishmongers gutting their catch, traders hawking wares from carts that looked older than they were. Children darted between stalls with baskets of wilted greens. The smell was salt, mud, and life stretched thin. The 8 made their way toward the market, the sun a pale coin struggling behind the clouds. Somewhere ahead, a woman's laughter, sharp and knowing, carried over the noise. The market of Withermarsh was a crooked circle of mud, timber stalls, and shivering canvas. The smell was a riot of brine, incense, and rot, the perfume of survival. Merchants barked half-heartedly, children wove through ankles, and gulls screamed from above, hungry for anything soft. And in the far corner, where smoke from cooking fires refused to drift, a small structure sagged and leaned toward the shallow river that ran through town as if it were being pulled into the marsh. A wooden sign swayed on its post, its paint worn thin by years of damp wind. "Madame Vieira sees all," it read. "This is it," Leaf muttered. "Looks like this house lost its will to live." Cassian brushed aside one of the silks in the doorway and ducked in first, the others following. Inside, the air was thick with myrrh and old secrets. Candles burned low in glass bowls filled with water, their reflections rippling along the fabric walls, making it seem as though the tent itself breathed. At the center sat an old woman behind a table draped in crimson velvet, her spine bent like a question mark. A deep green sash covered her eyes, but her head turned with unnerving precision towards each of them as they entered. Her voice, when it came, was high and cracked, yet carried an unsettling clarity like a flute played in the wrong key. "Ah," she crooned. "Cassian Valemont." Cassian froze mid-step. "I see you," she continued, smiling faintly beneath the sash. "All of you, and I can offer an enhanced reading for 10 gold, or a tokened sample of a fortune for a silver, if any of you are interested." The tent went still. Cassian's brow furrowed. "You know my name?" "I know what the night knows," Madame Vieira said, "and the night knows you." Jackson patted his coat with theatrical dismay. "I fear my purse is lighter than my charm, and yet neither gets me very far." "Perhaps spend less time on charm," Leaf said under his breath. Dorian was already producing a neat pouch of coins. "I'll pay for the enhanced reading," he said. Cassian hesitated, then followed suit. "The same." Vieira inclined her head, hands like paper as she spread the coins across the table. "So be it." The candles flickered blue, and her voice fell to a near whisper. "Cassian Valemont," she intoned. "Beneath the moonlit grove lies an ancient fang, once bathed in the blood of a righteous man. This relic, bound by both curse and boon, holds the key to balance your soul's tune. Seek it in your darkest hour, for it alone can temper darkness with light." Gabriel's gaze flicked towards Cassian, but said nothing. Cassian's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping near his temple. Vieira turned her head then towards Dorian. "Dorian Gearhart. A mechanism lies hidden in the ironworks of desolation, guarded by the creations of a mad artificer. This device can extract or bestow essence, offering a chance to free your brother's soul from its binding. Yet beware, for tampering with souls invites a perilous fate." The glow of Dorian's gauntlet dimmed. "You knew about him?" "The dead are noisy," she replied, her tone almost fond. Dion, who had been shifting impatiently in the corner, raised a hand. "Dion make great song," he declared. "Better than gold." Vieira's lips twitched. "We shall see. Play, and I will be the judge." Dion's grin widened. He unslung the accordion, the straps groaning, and let the first note swell through the tent. The tune had no words, but was rich with color, melancholy threaded with triumph, the rhythm of a man too alive to die quietly. When he finished, the air lingered on the final chord. Even the candles seemed to pause. "Accordion Dreadbell," she said at last, nodding slowly. "Well done. For you, an enhanced reading." Dion puffed up, beaming. In the ruins of the silent auditorium, amidst echoes of a forgotten symphony, a conductor's baton, crafted from the wood of the first tree, awaits. Its music can tame the beast within, granting mastery not only of sound, but of the heart's wild rhythm. A baton, Dion said, eyes wide. I like that. Jackson straightened, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. Well, I can hardly let that go unchallenged. Very well, said Vieira, let the music speak. He lifted his fiddle and began to play. The melody was graceful, intricate, yet something faltered halfway through, a missing phrase or a forgotten note. It did not end with a flourish, but with a sigh. The silence that followed was long enough to sting. That was... Dion began. Sufficient, Jackson snapped. Vieira smiled thinly. Even failed songs reveal truth. I will still give you your fortune, at a discount. Jackson opened his mouth, then closed it again. His pockets were lighter than his pride. Dorian reached forward and laid the coin on the table. The old woman's fingers brushed the gold. Jackson, dark melodies carry a cost. For every note gained, a memory lost. Your curse is your strength, yet it weaves your doom. Seek the silence between, or succumb to gloom. Jackson tried to laugh, but the sound didn't stick. The rest began to file out, the tent flap breathing in the morning breeze. But Juno lingered, watching the candles shiver. I'll catch up shortly, she told them. When the others had gone, she turned back to the seer. Madame Vieira, she said quietly, I don't have much gold, but in a world run by greedy men, perhaps another woman might offer some mercy. Vieira's head tilted, the sash catching a glint of light. You would ask a favor of fate? Not a favor, Juno said, just the truth. The old woman's smile deepened. You'll regret it less than a lie. The candles flared red. Juno, the crimson eclipse looms, a dark symphony orchestrated in the abyss. Yet amidst this imminent darkness, a light, pure and resolute, shall rise. Seek the shield of dawn, an artifact lost to the ages. Hidden within the ruins of the abandoned watchtower, its light can pierce the deepest night, and its power is an anathema to those who live in the dark. The tent went still again. The last candle sputtered, leaving only the smell of smoke and prophecy. Juno solemnly nodded to the oracle and stepped backwards through the curtain into the daylight. The others had already vanished into the crowd beyond, headed towards the alchemist's shop. She waited until no one was watching and then pulled a small scrap of parchment from her pouch. Friend of the Raven, she wrote, her hand quick but steady. Please provide any details of the whereabouts of the place called the Abandoned Watchtower, or any information on an item called the Shield of Dawn. Signed, Juno. She folded it once and slipped it into the crack of a stone wall and placed a small feather there as well, just subtle enough for the right eyes to find. She then turned toward the scent of potions and salt and followed her party into the heart of the market. The alchemist's shop sat tucked between two buildings near the end of the market lane, its crooked sign painted with a curling serpent biting its own tail. Faint violet smoke drifted from the chimney, curling into the mist like a promise or a warning. The door creaked as they entered, releasing a rush of the scent that was both inviting and dangerous. Honeyed herbs, singed copper, and something faintly metallic like rain on a blade. Inside, the room was small but alive. Shelves climbed the walls in cluttered harmony, vials of swirling color, bundles of dried leaves hanging upside down, and jars of things that might have once been alive. Light filtered through stained glass bottles, scattering ripples of blue and green across the ceiling. Behind a narrow counter stood a woman with sharp silver hair pinned messily atop her head, gloves ink-stained to the wrists. Her eyes, the color of pale wine, moved over them with quick assessment. "Welcome," she said, voice smooth and edged. "I'm Silka. Try not to touch anything that looks like it's breathing." Jackson peered at a jar that was, in fact, quietly pulsing. Noted. Dorian stepped forward, adjusting the strap of his satchel. "Good morning. We heard your name from the tavern. Old Ruin mentioned that you're missing a flower." "He talks too much," Silka said, though not unkindly. She moved to a nearby table littered with parchment and glass tubing. "Yes, the nocturnal bloom. It only opens once every decade and only under true darkness. Grows in the dire wood forest, deep past the marsh's edge. Ever heard of it? She turned to face them fully now, one brow raised. If you're volunteering, I should tell you that people who wander that far don't usually wander back. You're in luck, Leaf said, leaning on the counter. We've made a career out of not wandering back. And yet, here you stand, Silka said dryly. Statistically, that won't last. Gabriel glanced at the shelves. What's so important about this flower, anyway? Its petals absorb ambient moonlight, she replied, her tone slipping into that of a woman who loved her craft more than her caution. It feeds on shadow, stores it, bends it. I need it to finish a formula. An elixir of shadows. Sounds poetic, Jackson said, idly brushing dust off his sleeve. What does it do? It grants invisibility to those who walk beneath darkness, she replied, reaching for a quill and jotting something into a ledger. True invisibility, not illusion, not trick of light. The shadows will literally forget you exist. Dion's eyes widened. That's terrifying. And useful, Leaf replied. Silka smirked. Depending on your intentions. If we find it, Dorian said, what's the payment? 1 extra vial, she said immediately. The rest belongs to me. Jackson tilted his head. His smile was sly. Would you consider a musician's discount? I could compose you a jingle, something about disappearing debts, maybe? Silka's eyes flicked toward him. Your humor's worth less than your coin. But if you live long enough to return, perhaps we'll renegotiate. Dorian thought for a moment. What if it's information we're after? Then answers, where I can be truthful, I will give, she replied quickly. She turned and plucked a small scroll from the shelf, setting it on the counter. A map, barely accurate, but drawn by the last fool who tried. Follow the path until the trees begin to hum, but don't follow the hum. Why not? Dion asked. Because you won't enjoy what's really making the hum, she said. There was a silence for a beat. Even the bubbling beakers seemed to listen. Silka shrugged, turning back to her workbench. Bring me the bloom intact, and I'll give you the information you came for. Dorian nodded. We'll bring it. Good, she said. Bring it before it wilts. The bloom dies the moment sun touches it, like most beautiful things. The group exchanged glances, equal parts intrigue and dread. The smell of the place clung to them as they turned to leave, heavy with promise and rot. At the threshold, Silka called after them, Oh, one more thing. They paused. If you see lights in the forest that move unnaturally, she said, don't follow them. They belong to something that remembers being human, and it misses the company. Saberic blinked. Comforting. Silka's grin was razor thin. Then we understand each other. The door shut behind them with a chime of glass. The scent of crushed herbs followed them into the fog. Outside, Withermarsh's streets continued about their day, slow but with purpose. The 8 new friends glanced at each other and began to make their way towards the town's edge. Right about then, deep in the marsh, the dire wood forest stirred, and nearby, the nocturnal bloom waited, with the sound of a babbling brook for background music, listing slowly under a canopy of trees.
And that wraps up another episode of the 7 Masks of Malice. I hope you're enjoying the journey and you're excited for what comes next. If you are, of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe, the like, the bell, do the things that help me out. And of course, we'll see you right here, same time, same place, next week.